Sex and sexual education has been a taboo topic for as long as any of us can remember. It makes people uncomfortable, adults and children alike. Most of us can hearken back to a time, probably around 10 or 11 years old, when your supposed sexual education began. But the reality is that most of us have been exposed to these ideas before. The media, the rumors that were spread on the playground, and our peers had initiated our education much earlier in our lives. For this reason, it is something that must be addressed. The United States is a large and varied country, with opinions and values running from one end of the spectrum to the other, and everywhere in between. In a society that is so large and heterogeneous, how do we address something so universal as sex without offending some people and falling short of others' expectations? Especially in this charged political climate with the impending election, issues of sex, sexuality, and healthy sexual culture have been flooding the news. We want to get to the bottom of the heart of the issues that divide us on sexual education. We asked our interviewees a series of questions to get at our main conceptual question. What is the school's responsibility in fostering knowledge regarding a healthy sexual culture?
In a word, very poor. 2 words, very poor.
Yes, I went to a Catholic school my whole life, and we started 5th grade, and each year, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we had sex ed, and the boys and girls were separated.
I think it was 7th grade is when they did it at my school. The teacher pretty much, the main thing I remember is first week we went in and got all the words out of our systems, all the bad words that we knew.
Grade school, so kindergarten to 8th grade, I went to an Episcopalian day school. Our sex ed there, I think we had the boys class in 7th grade, and then I think we had 8th grade, we kind of went into guys and girls, we watched both videos.
Let's see, in 4th grade, Planned Parenthood came in and did a sex education class. I was in a 4th, 5th mixed class, so usually it would happen in 5th grade, but since I was in a combined class, they came in and worked with all of us.
I would say 3rd or 4th grade.
I think 5th grade is a good time. That's when it started for my school, and I think that's kind of when people start to have questions about that. I think before then, children are not really interested in talking about that, and I don't think we'd want to have that conversation quite yet, and I think 5th grade is kind of when people start to become interested in other sex, and that's kind of an appropriate time to start discussing what it...
I think 7th grade was appropriate for us, but I think kids are maturing faster these days. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but so maybe a year or 2 earlier would be better nowadays.
I would like to say that you should start as early as when the kid goes to school.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously you're not going to teach about sex. You're going to teach about their bodies and about how they use their bodies to understand. And the thing about kids is that that's how they use their bodies, right? They use their bodies to understand the world.
Yeah, I think it definitely should increase on what's taught kind of each year. In 5th grade, I think maybe very basics on what a period is and things like that. That's what I was taught in 5th grade.
So at the 5th grade age, I think the basics of intercourse are important, but most fundamentally, how to take care of oneself is the most important topic. Things like regulating a menstrual cycle, the ability for boys to check themselves monthly.
I think teachers of the same sex are probably the most comforting people for the children or for the students to be learning from, because they know the teacher, and so I think they're probably more comfortable asking them questions and talking to them afterwards. But then also I think it's important for them to be of the same sex as them to make things a little probably less awkward for them.
I guess it should be a health professional, but it didn't really matter to me as long as they did it right, I guess. So
there are two criteria that I think are important for who teaches sex education. The first is he or she who is most proximate to the individual, because I think that there needs to be a level of intimacy to this conversation. And there also has to be a level of qualification as well. So not only should the person be proximate to the young person who's learning about sex ed, but there should also be a mutual trust and an understanding between those two people.
You know, so the teacher is also a close person, right? The healthcare professional is distant. And it's very interesting because it seems like the more distant and technical the person can be, the easier it is to talk about.
I think schools have a pretty strong responsibility. I think a lot of parents won't necessarily bring up those conversations with their kids, and their kids, I think a lot of times, will get shy in front of their parents. I think it's kind of nice to have it in the curriculum so that it's known that every child at that age has some sort of standard of what they've learned.
as parents, it could be a lot more private, and the kid would be able to express his questions more freely than he would in the classroom. He'd probably be embarrassed to ask a bunch of questions in front of his friends. So I think the parents should do the majority of the sex ed teaching.
The school is responsible for teaching what scientifically occurs, and it's incumbent on the guardians and the family and the parents of the young person to teach more of like the emotional aspect of what happens during puberty and these times of change.
I don't know. I think that parents definitely need to like have a role in the conversation, but I think teachers can and should be trained to have these conversations with students as well.
Yeah, I think they have a big responsibility. I think they have responsibility with males and teaching them how to, treat a woman properly, and also females should be taught that also.
I think that starts with not making gender assumptions. That would be like the biggest key in my mind, to not assume that a relationship is between a boy and a girl.
So again, I think it should be some sort of collaborative effort. The schools can obviously provide they have more resources on the subject. They have videos your parents won't have or don't want to show you. They have the other resources available to them, and I think just the parents are a good way to be kind of a genesis or start for that dialogue.
I think that schools do need to take some responsibility for teaching that, and that since we know that the majority of young people are going through the school system, that's where they can be educated on those things.
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I think if you just say like, this is how sex happens, first of all, that's like really, most of the time that's going to be really non-inclusive to like non-straight people, and like gender non-conforming people. I think it's really that kind of language really quickly becomes non-inclusive.
After deliberating, we came up with 3 different solutions that ended up being divided along political lines. There is one solution that falls more closely along the conservative views of our interviews. The second solution runs more moderately, taking into account a variety of options. The third and final solution is by far the most liberal in that it is a comprehensive, no-holds-barred approach to sexual education. We tried to come up with solutions that addressed a variety of issues, backgrounds, value bases, and political issues. While we feel that we did a pretty good job of this, it is important to take into account our own biases on the issues. Each solution has its advantages and disadvantages, but that is the nature of tackling such a complicated and charged issue.